Hey, welcome into the Stinkin Truth Podcast. Mark Schlereth alongside Mike Evans. Mike, gosh, it feels like it's been forever. It was only a week ago that we did a podcast, but it feels like it's been a while.
I know. There's so much happening, but yet this is still kind of the quote-unquote dead time in the summer before it all gets started. But we're only, a couple of weeks away?
I guess it's almost 2 weeks since we did because we had the 4th of July off, so we didn't do anything. Right?
We didn't do anything.
So it has been 2 weeks.
It has
That's
been 2
why
weeks.
it feels so. I knew it felt longer.
I've missed you.
I knew.
You big lug.
I miss your musk.
Oh,
I miss your musk.
But there's plenty of stuff going on. I know you're fired up. You just were at the Fox NFL Summit.
Sure.
Most people would call it a seminar. No. Whenever Mark Schlereth and that kind of high-priced talent is together, star power, it becomes a summit.
Right.
So you were out there. What were some of the takeaways? Because I know that a lot of the officials you'll get kind of talk to about what's coming down the pike in the NFL. Anything that fans need to be aware of that might be different.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of major rule changes. Obviously, with like video assistant and some of the mechanisms for officiating, they will try to expedite the game and ultimately not let as many things go or try to make rulings so not as many things go to challenge, right? Which has always been my thought process in the first place anyhow. Do you want to get it right all the time or just want to get it right when you have a challenge?
Right.
Like that doesn't make any sense to me. So why isn't everything video assist? If you have an official up and he goes, let me look at that really quick. No, move on. Or no, we need to look at that. Like we need to take more time. I don't understand. I guess it's the strategy of how you use your challenge flags or whatever, but I always think it looks like a clown show. So but that's me personally. But just kind of the mechanisms of how that video assist gets done, how they operate, coming into challenges, what they're trying to do, how they're trying to expedite the process. So that, as soon as, you score a touchdown, somebody looks at that video and says, yeah, that's good. Or, oh, hey, we need to look at it. So some of that stuff, I think there was only one major change, one major rule change, and that is you can fair catch a kickoff or if you get a safety and you have the punt, where you punt it, the punt kick, whatever that is called. I don't even know what it's called. But you can fair catch anything inside the 25 and it comes out to the 25. So, the whole theory is about 37% of kickoffs were returned last year. And they're trying to eliminate that play essentially as much as they can. And so they think they've done, a bunch of number crunching. They've got a bunch of, people out there that are nerds. And they have figured out that they think that's going to take it down to about 30 to 31% of returns. But it's a valuable tool. Think back a couple of years ago to the Kansas City Buffalo game, right, where they kicked off through the end zone and Kansas City got the ball at the 25. And what they should have done is these kickers are so talented, they should have just, mortar kicked it to the 1 yard line, made somebody return it, and eat 5 seconds off the clock.
Right.
Well, now you could just fair catch that. You're on the 2, you just fair catch it. It comes out the 25 anyhow, and no time comes off the clock. So now it's not so much about kicking it really high and putting it on the 1 yard line. Now it's going to become about squib kicking and making people return it on a squib kick. So, you'll see special teams coaches. There's an advantage there if you're a good coverage team. There's an advantage there to pinning somebody behind the 20, whatever. Maybe squib kicking it right at an lineman that's on the, on the second line of people there, where that dude is either forced to react to the ball or get out of the way, and then it disrupts your return that you have set and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be like really the only major rule change that I think that will have an effect on the way teams operate and the way special teams operate on kickoffs.
So the bullseye is on the backs of the Kansas City Chiefs as the defending Super Bowl champs, and you've had a chance to. You love diving into the film. You love studying the film, and you've had a chance to look at some Chiefs film as you get ready to call your first game of the season, which will be Arizona and Washington. So explain why you're looking at Chiefs film and what stands out.
Yeah. Okay, so Arizona Chiefs was week 1 of last year, and the Chiefs hung 44 on Arizona. Well, Jonathan Gannon comes from Philadelphia and takes over the Arizona Cardinals. So, hey, man, that's a good thing to look at, right? Arizona, and not so much schematically, but from a personnel standpoint, and how do the Chiefs expose that personnel? So I looked at that, and then I also went back and did a deep dive into the Super Bowl because Jonathan Gannon came from Philadelphia. He ran the defense of Philadelphia, and what did the Chiefs put up? 38 in that game. So I wanted to look at those two games to see what made the Chiefs the Chiefs.
By the way, since we're talking about Jonathan Gannon, can I just get this out of the way?
Yeah.
Pew, pew, pew,
Yeah.
pew.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So they will. Okay. Yeah. They will go down that road. But it was a really fascinating study on the Chiefs, and I haven't done any Chiefs games. So it was interesting when I went back and kind of dove deep into it. Amazing. Once they lost some of their receivers, and they lost, the cheetah Tyreek Hill. He went to the Miami Dolphins. They had some injuries at the receiver position. How they transitioned from being a wide receiver dominant football team to how they came into a heavier personnel packages. So, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends. I mean, I bet you they're in 2 tight formations and 3 tight formations 50% of the time. And here's an offense that's pretty wide open, right? That has a really good passing game, that puts up unbelievable numbers in the passing game, that's running it out of more condensed formations, more multiple, heavy personnel groupings. And what they do to expose people in that. So in Arizona, playing the Arizona Cardinals are funny because they're a team that under Vance Joseph, who's now in Denver as a defense coordinator, a lot of blitz off the edge, and they want to play you in nickel and dime packages because they have a bunch of different kind of corner safety combinations that all can cover, that all can play, and that all are pretty aggressive. And one of the guys that I think is a big difference maker in this league is Budda Baker at the safety position, but he plays a lot of nickel, and he can man-to-man cover, he can zone cover, he can play deep. But where he really makes his hay, where he's become an outstanding player and really made a name for himself, is in the box as kind of a nickel corner, if you will, and a run support guy and a blitz guy and all that kind of stuff. And so they played them in a lot of – Kansas City played them in a lot of heavy personnel. And my assumption or what I think they were doing is saying, hey, we're gonna make you, match us to base. So we're gonna make you play 3 linebackers, and we're gonna take Budda Baker out of the box, so we don't have to contend with him in there. So we don't have to worry about some of their blitz package and some of the stuff they do. The other thing that was really interesting is watching the Arizona Cardinals come pressure off the edge. So a lot of times when you walk up in the middle, you get those double A gap blitzers. A lot of times those guys are basically bluffing to hold your protection inside so they can bring edge pressure, right? That's what they want to do. Well, when you got a guy like Mahomes, and Mahomes is just a witch. I mean, the guy is just there's so many rewindable moments where you just look at him and go, really? Like being a Denver guy, yeah. I look at it and go, really? No wonder we haven't beaten them 15 times in a row. Like, they've beaten the Denver Broncos 15 times in a row.
There are a lot of fan bases that feel the same way.
And the dude is just freaking phenomenal. I can't tell you how many times, we always look at the marvel at the no-look pass and stuff. Dude, it's just standard operating procedure where he'll get a dude that's running he'll get Travis Kelce on a over, right? And they'll get pressure off the edge, and he'll step in the pocket, manipulate around, and his body will kind of move to this side, and all of a sudden it's a window that's it's like a milk carton, right? And all of a sudden he goes up, and he just is looking this way, and goes, heat. That way, boom, dime piece, right? Tink right there. And I mean, it's just like you're going, my gosh, this guy is a freak show. And, I talk about the edge pressure. Well, he's so good at stepping up in the pocket and manipulating the pocket and keeping his vision downfield, understanding where everybody is, and then just being able to throw from any arm angle. Like, it's remarkable to watch him play.
But it's freak school meets old school. Right? Because, he can make those kind of throws, but yet, whereas a lot of quarterbacks, the moment they see pressure, they take off out to the edges. He still has that pocket awareness, pocket presence that all the great pocket quarterbacks have had over the years, whether it be a Joe Montana, a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady. They all have that pocket awareness, how to manipulate the pocket. Mahomes has that too, which I think sometimes is part of his game that gets overlooked. The really old school fundamental greatness of his game.
Yeah, manipulating, you manipulating coverage and holding guys and throwing it where they ain't and all that. Yeah, he does it all exceptionally well, but there are so many just rewindable moments where you're like, I got to see that again. And then, Arizona played them with a bunch of man coverage, and so they're running a bunch of mesh concepts and double moves off of they'll set something up, like they'll run, like if they get a tight end, like Travis Kelce will be flexed outside the Z receiver, and he'll short motion in, then he'll run a drive or a shallow cross, whatever, right? And they hit that and they get yardage, and so now all of a sudden they trace it, and this man and the guys coming with him, and they fake that shallow cross, and then boop, they run a go off of it, and there's Travis Kelce, touchdown, and then bring out the band. And they do a great job of setting themselves up and seeing what you're playing or how you're playing, and then they've got the guys that can get it done. We always talk about, is it coaching or is it players? And, to be honest, it's a little bit of both, right? You got to have a coach that can design those things, but ultimately you can design those all day long. If your players aren't smart enough to execute them or aren't athletic enough to execute them and don't run good enough routes or don't set guys up well enough, because if you get a guy that's in trail and he's on your hip and you're running that shallow cross and he stays in leverage with you, like he gets in your tailpipe and basically right there. Well, when you spin out of it and try, he's got you covered, right? You're going to run into him. But the key is to sell it and to get that guy where he's not just behind you or not in perfect leverage, but he's just getting over the top, and now I spin out, and now he's screwed, right? And just the feel you have to be able to do those things. So as important as coaching is, and it's important, players are more important,
sure,
right? The Jimmies and Joes defeat the X's and O's, and, you think about it, think about Andy Reid, surefire Hall of Famer, one of the best coaches. I saw a bunch of stuff. Is it Andy Reid or Bill Belichick? How many Super Bowls did Andy Reid win before he had Patrick Mahomes? What was that? He went to one with McNabb. Yeah. They went to one, and they had Alex Smith? No. Just like the facts are the facts, right?
No, but what you are talking about, though, when you do talk about the importance of coaching, what you've just described here with the Chiefs is some adaptability, and understanding that, hey, maybe we don't have Tyreek Hill here, we don't have the same kind of receivers, so now we're going with more tight ends. And I think that as a football fan, maybe other football fans watching this might think the same thing. I think sometimes we think about the really great play callers in this league, and we think, okay, they have their system. Mm-hmm. But they really do adapt, don't they? They coach to what they have, right, and they're not necessarily as rigid my way or the highway when it comes to their system. Their system can change and evolve,
right,
over the years.
Yeah, and think about, just go back, if you think of the recesses of your mind, the Super Bowl. So they get 2 touchdowns, 2 third-down plays, one from one side, one from the other side. The first one, Kadarius Toney, they short motion him in. They get follow, so it's going to be some type of man, and then they're going to zone it off because you can see the corner. I think it's Darius Slay looking at the safety saying basically, Banjo, you take him from if he goes across, and he just stops right behind that receiver. They almost stop, whoop, out the backside, touchdown. It's like stealing. And nobody's on that side of the field. It was like, so what do? They get in the third down again, the very next drive, opposite side of the field. Now it's Sky Moore, same motion. They get trapped again in a man deal and out the backside, touchdown again. And I think one of the things that's really cool about studying film is you'll see a play or a group of plays or a formation that a team really likes. And then you'll see a play out of that formation, and then you'll see the exact same formation, the exact same motion, the exact same personnel group, and you'll see at least 1 or 2 adjunct plays off that play. And basically, it's like a pitcher that's throwing every pitch from a different arm slot or from the same exact arm slot, right? So when he's throwing, he's like 96 from here, right? And then it's all of a sudden a slider that's 82 from here, and a curveball that's 84, and then 88 slider and an 82 mile an hour curveball, and then all of a sudden it's a changeup, and it's all coming. It all looks identical. If you're on, it's impossible to hit that guy, and that's what the great play callers like Andy Reid or Kyle Shanahan, they do that. They make you play a certain formation, a certain personnel grouping, a certain play, and then they absolutely just mind screw you with three things off of it that look identical that get you. And, you know, and they wait, right? They set you up. And it's just like, you know, they throw out the lure and they just right, and they get you and they get you and then all of a sudden they throw something else out there.
You have the fate of the universe. One football game to play. Fate of the universe is on the line.
Right.
You can have one current NFL play caller. Who is it and why?
Ooh, I would take Kyle Shanahan as my play caller because he can win and he can tie you up in knots in the running game, and the way they operate from an angle standpoint he does the same thing in the running game where he'll run one play and for the offense one or two guys has to change kind of entry point or what they're doing, and the other 9 guys have to do the exact same thing. And so it's essentially you're running the exact same play over and over and over again, and to the defense, it'll look like 6 different plays. And they'll just pummel you with the same thing over and over, but just a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a nuance to that play. And he does a great job with that. And then he wins with Purdy. He wins with, he just wins with a Jimmy G. He just wins with quarterbacks that, other guys ultimately aren't going to win with. It's like Joe Gibbs, my former coach in Washington, won a Super Bowl with Theismann, won a Super Bowl with Doug Williams, won a Super Bowl with Mark Rippon. I mean, you want to talk about great coaching? Yeah. You want to talk about great coaching? Yeah. That's unreal.
Yeah.
And I know the league is a little bit different than it was then, but that is unreal.
While we're talking about play callers, offensive coordinators, how about the story in Philadelphia of Brian Johnson, who has become the offensive coordinator of the Eagles? And unbeknownst to the Eagles, the relationship that he has had back to his childhood with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. His dad, Jalen Hurts' dad, is a coach, and he coached Brian Johnson. And I think the cool thing about that story is, you go into an interview and you want to give yourself every chance. It's
Absolutely.
an 8-hour interview.
Yeah.
8-hour interview, and they're just talking football, right? And talking philosophy and what you want to do and all this, that, and the other when they hired him as the quarterback coach. And never once did he mention in that 8 hours that he's known Jalen since he was a little kid, that Jalen's dad coached him in high school. He never used that as a trump card. The fact that he just wanted to get this job based on the merit of his coaching over the course of his career, which I
would all lead with that.
Right.
We'd lead with it.
By the way, I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, I'm tight with Jalen.
Yeah. But he never used it. It's just like a testament to his character and the way he wants to be perceived and the way he wants to earn his opportunities. I thought that was a really cool story about Brian Johnson.
That's cool. As we talk about a new wave of young quarterbacks coming into the league, which ones will make it, which ones won't. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, I love his honesty because he's being blunt when he says, hey, Anthony Richardson needs to play. It might not look good. It might look ugly.
Yeah.
It might be a struggle, but he has to play. Do you agree with that? That these rookie quarterbacks just need to be thrown into the deep end and sink or swim?
I agree with it probably more now than I did in my day, simply because of the way the game has changed. Anthony Richardson is a phenomenal athlete. So there's a lot of things you can do with a guy like that. That take a little bit off of, if you've got a plate, and you're divvying that plate up, it takes something off that plate that from just a mental understanding, a progression kind of understanding of how we can be successful without having to be successful, all through nothing but the pocket. And so now all of a sudden you've got the RPO game. And those are simple, like one receiver route reads. So essentially, when you're talking about, like for instance, RPO glance. So let's just say a glance route is like what they call a glance route. It's a slant. Okay, it's a backside slant. So you've just got an X receiver. Okay, and all you're really doing in a single high look on that weak side is you're reading that linebacker. So if that linebacker, as you fake a handoff, that linebacker steps up, you run that slant behind him with a single corner. You got a single high safety, boom. And it's basically you're saying, hey, if he drops back to take away the slant, right, if he hand it off. If he sucks up on the fake, pull it, whoop, RPO, run pass option. That's what we're doing. So that becomes an easy, what did he do? Hand it off. Okay, he played up. Now I'm just throwing a slant, and you're only looking at that one guy. So it becomes a really kind of, and it's, oversimplification. And then you do the same thing if it's a safety down, right? If the safety plays up, it's the same exact thing. So now all of a sudden I've got one call. I've got two options, either to hand it off or to throw it. And then all of a sudden I can also add the option of the quarterback run into something like that.
Because these quarterbacks are just so freakishly athletic.
Right.
More and more now.
Right. And so now all of a sudden I'm doing the same thing when I'm getting a double team and I'm reading that defensive end. If he squeezes, hand it off. If he doesn't, or if he squeezes, pull it and go around the edge. If he feathers it, then let the running back take it, right, on a dive. And so now you've got that aspect of the option in there as well. So these athletic quarterbacks, and then when you start boot keeping, you start running waggles to the front side or boot keep out the backside, now all of a sudden I've got a half field read that becomes a very easy, from your progression. I always call it kind of a linear progression. So normally if I boot keep, so I fake let's say I fake the handoff to the left and I boot out the backside to the right. What do I have? I've got somebody in the flat, right? Somebody who's running like tight end slide, bam. So he's sliding out to the front. So he's got that right there. So that's one. Then two is usually an intermediate over route by another tight end, right? So now I've got 1, 2 right at my eye level. And then I've got a third guy that's running off traffic essentially, right? And running a comeback or whatever he's running. But it becomes, you flip your head around and you go, okay, first guy's open, bam. Second guy's open, bam. It becomes a very 1, 2, 3 kind of linear progression.
All on the same side of the field.
All on the same side of the field. So I'm not even worried about that backside. It doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
And if those guys all get covered, what do? I take off and run. So I think from Irsay's perspective, he's got to play. He's going to learn the drop back aspect of football along the way.
Right.
But we've got so many more tools than we had in my day to integrate a guy and to let him have success while he's learning the game. And so from that standpoint, it makes perfect sense. And let's face it, this is what a lot of these guys did in college. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't exposed to that. It's not like you're saying, hey, the guy doesn't have the capability of doing it and he doesn't understand the game from the neck up. It's the guy was never asked to do it.
Right.
Like, how can you expect a guy to be able to kind of operate solely from the pocket when the guy's never been exposed to operating solely from the pocket? So it's part of the learning progression. But in today's game with an athlete at quarterback, and we've seen so many guys, it's changed the way the quarterback position is played now. With those guys, I think the transition from college to the pros becomes much smoother, and it's quite a bit easier.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then all the other intangibles that you're out there, you're earning the respect of your teammates, you're learning what it's like to be in the NFL, all the things that go on during the week with being the franchise guy.
Yeah.
You're able to get a head start on getting ahead of all those things. So, yeah, you could see why it's easier for quarterbacks coming into the league than it may have been in the past. How about, though, when it comes to the kind of help that you give quarterbacks versus once a quarterback has made it. I wanted to ask you specifically about wide receivers. We here in Denver, the Denver Broncos have the most expensive, most money devoted to their wide receivers than any other team in the NFL. And that's with a quarterback in Russell Wilson that they're getting ready to pay $250 million to. Where do you come down on the idea that, you know, we've got this kind of quarterback, so we invest in pass catchers this way, versus we're one of the lucky ones that have found our franchise guy?
Yeah.
Does that change how you put receivers around that player?
Yeah, I think that obviously receivers, every position is a dependent position. The receivers, to me, is one of the most dependent positions in football. 10 other guys have to do their job for you to sniff a football. So, you know, you may think that you may think that you're God's gift and that you're the nucleus of the cell or whatever,
Here
right?
comes the offensive line bias, everybody.
that everything else orbits around you, but of course you don't understand football. Anyhow, I do think that, like, I look at the Broncos receiving room, I go, how can that room be the most expensive room in football? Like, you want to talk about a mismanagement of funds and a mismanagement of building a team. I still believe you build a team from the inside out, right? You got to have a great offensive line. You got to have a running game. You got to have a quarterback. And, you know, obviously it's important to have tight ends, and it's important to have those guys. I mean, it all works together. But, like, I look at the Broncos receiving room right now. They've got 5 guys. They've got Jerry Jeudy, who's a first rounder, Cortland Sutton, who's a second rounder. They've got Tim Patrick. I don't know if Tim Patrick was undrafted. Tim Patrick, who I think is their best player in that position, like best football player in the wide receiver room. They've got KJ Hamler, who's a second rounder who can flat run, and then they just drafted Marvin Mims in the second round. Now Marvin Mims is going to make the team. He's a second round draft pick to this coaching staff, right? So he's going to make the team. Of those 5 guys, you're not keeping all 5 of those guys on your roster. During the offseason, they tried to move somebody. They couldn't get it done, right? Their asking price was too high. But at some point, either somebody's going to get cut or somebody's going to get moved in training camp. That's my prediction. Because to me, you can't have 5 guys on your roster. 5 guys are going to make the team. Only 4 of them will make the team, because you can't have 5 guys on your roster that don't play special teams. And I don't know what Marvin Mims does, but as a second rounder, he ain't covering kickoffs, right? He's not going to be a punt cover guy. It's not going to happen. So one of those guys has got to be moved, whether it's KJ Hamler or whether they can get draft capital or a player for a guy like Cortland Sutton or maybe even a Jerry Jeudy. I think you're going to see that. The other thing that I would predict, again, Tim Patrick coming off an ACL, he is their best football player. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sean Payton give him a much bigger role in this offense. And I think about Michael Thomas's, his ascension to being the guy that, catches 140 balls a year before he got injured. When you watch him, most of his, if you take the box, right? So a couple yards outside of each tight end, 8 yards deep. Like, when I think of Michael Thomas, that's where I think him catching the ball.
That's his office.
Right. That's where he does his work. Using that big bodying people up, whether you're running a little spot route, whether you're running a little comeback, a little hookup, whether you're running the shallow, the drive or the shallow cross, a basic, like, that's where you're making your money. And then it's catch and run, it's being physical, it's out bodying people up and all that kind of stuff. It's not even one of those, hey, double move outside, I'm open, that's not who he is. And I could see Tim Patrick taking over that role effectively, because he's a dog now. He's a big physical cat, ain't afraid, and he's got unreal hands. I mean, the guy doesn't drop balls. So I could see him kind of becoming a Sean Payton favorite. Like, this is my guy. This is where our offense is going to center around him in the passing game.
So the Broncos will be hoping that a pretty important receiver for another team gets hurt, so that they'll be on the phone to the Broncos for one of their logjammer receivers.
Yeah,
that's what they're hoping for.
I would think that would be key. And I think the way you look at, the way I would look at the Broncos right now is, what you see is not what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. Like, they're going to move a receiver, I believe, or cut a receiver. I also believe they'll probably bring another running back in at some point. Like, Sean Payton will have eyes for other guys that he knows and that he's coaching, and that's part of changing the culture. It's kind of the Bill Parcells theme is I want guys that can take my coaching, that will understand what I'm trying to accomplish and help everybody else come along. So I wouldn't be surprised to see several other, guys after training camp gets going and there's cuts.
Yep.
Guys that Sean has coached before that become part of the Denver Broncos. I think you'll see that.
Makes sense.
All right. Hey, listen, for everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth podcast, we thank you so much for listening. Continue to download the show. Thank you so much. Continue to listen and share with your friends. We appreciate you guys. We'll be back with you next week.